Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, we're second last in the afternoon, so we're going to try to make this really fun and interactive. A little bit about what we're trying to cover here today is about sourcing and talent agility. A little bit about my background. I started an RPO about 10 years ago, focused on the retail restaurant industries in Canada. We'll do about 18,000 hires this year, and we work with a lot of small towns, but some of the tough to fill stuff we're going to talk about today is really about, let me take a step back. One of the conversations we had as a group was in these panel type exercises, there's a bunch of questions and everyone answers and everyone likes to agree with each other, and it sometimes can get a little bit boring. So what we decided to do is argue with each other for 45 minutes. I'm joking.
For at least 40, though.
For at least 40.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to cover off almost a case study approach. So the thinking here is that both Key and Brandon are going to share two unique case studies of some recent projects and programs they've worked on where they've struggled to find great talent. So let me just kind of go into some intros. I first want to introduce Brandon Moreno. Brandon's the former director of global talent acquisition for Herbalife. Brandon, why don't you kind of give the audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks, Cam. So as of Monday, in full transparency, I am no longer with Herbalife, but it's been a fun run. So when I was brought into Herbalife, they hired me to really take a deep dive into their process and their global systems. Hadn't had a leader for about 6 or 7 years, and we really needed to take a look to say, how do we manage double-digit growth? How do we manage double-digit revenue growth? And how do we structure the team so that we can meet this demand over the next 5 years?
Awesome. And for those who aren't familiar with Herbalife, can you tell?
Yeah, so how many of you have heard of Herbalife? Had a product? How many use Herbalife? No, you don't have to share. Herbalife's a great company. They're in over 90 countries, 8,000 employees globally, 2,300 here in the US, and we have 4.1 million members. So pretty big organization, and the goal is to be at 12,000 employees globally by 2020, and that number on the member side will continue to increase.
Awesome.
So we like to have a lot of fun at Herbalife.
Awesome.
Nice.
Other presenter is Kia Walker, and she's the head of talent acquisition for SolarCity. Kia, do you want to provide a bit of an intro?
Sure. So I started at SolarCity coming up on 5 years, which we joke is about, in SolarCity years, it feels like 20, because we've been in absolute hyper growth. Have you heard of SolarCity? Okay, well, here's my recruiting ace. Have you heard of Elon Musk? Okay, so SolarCity was started by his two cousins. I'll talk about it in a moment. But since I started, I had a recruiting team of 2 people, one recruiter, one coordinator. Now I have built the team to a team of 150 people. We've gone global. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And we have grown from 700 employees to over 14,000. So we hire on average about 350 people every single week.
Wow.
Jeez. Every single week. And just to put that in comparison, when Google, we've referenced Google, was post-IPO and they were hiring really rapidly, they were hiring 150 people a week, and they had a recruiting team of 300 people. So we're the exact inverse. It's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun, and happy to talk to you about some of the war stories.
Cool. Really quick summary about SolarCity.
So SolarCity provides clean, affordable solar. So we mainly focus on homeowners. I joined SolarCity almost 5 years ago because my husband and I bought a new house, and we were looking to save money and use clean energy, so I became a customer. We also have commercial applications. We're based in San Mateo, which is just outside of the Bay Area, but now we're in 15 states, and we're in the process of building a gigafactory in Buffalo, so we will now be fully integrated.
Awesome. And everybody in the room wants to know, have you met Elon Musk?
I just was telling Cam, I've seen the back of his head, and of course I've seen his Tesla pull up many times. So
it's rumored that he doesn't actually walk, he just kind of floats about 6 inches off the ground. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to break into some case studies. So we're going to go, I think it's Kia first, then Brandon. Did I get that right? Yeah. I put together the slides. I should have it right. And then we're going to go back and forth here through a few case studies to talk about some different types of roles, different types of challenges, and we're really hoping to provide a bit of a spectrum. And a bit of a segue into this, we started the morning with a lot of discussion around strategy and ideas and big picture components, and really trying to drive this down into some very, very practical takeaways here for you. And our hope is that you'll be able to kind of, I guess, of the 4 stories, there should be something there that really resonates with you. So with that being said, why don't we go, and you talked about global, so why don't we talk a little bit about, and this is a crazy story, but how you guys and the speed in which you had to go into Mexico.
Well, at SolarCity, our co-founders, Pete and Lyndon Rive, they're first cousins with Elon. Since the day that I joined 5 years ago, the messaging has been, we're going to go international any year now, probably in a year. So that has been our story for 5 years. So I'm in the break room. This is how things work at SolarCity. I see my boss getting a coffee, and he said, oh, we might actually be going international, probably Mexico. Great, that sounds great. I don't really think about it the rest of the day. I see him at the end of the day, and he comes to me, okay, we're going to Mexico, so what's your strategy? I'm like, seriously? And he didn't crack a smile. So that's how quickly things happen. It's kind of hurry up and wait, and then go, light speed. That's our team motto, actually, is #lightspeed. So as things would have it, we had nothing. We have no recruiters on site. I don't have a hiring plan. We don't have a careers portal. I'm really wishing that I'd paid attention to Spanish in 9th grade. I've eaten a lot of fish tacos, and I've driven a Jeep through Mexico, but that was my extent of my Mexico experience. So there were some lessons along the way, which I'm happy to talk about. But now, from 60 days ago, when I got that go live and having that coffee break, we now have 100 employees. By this Friday, we'll have 100 employees starting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What was the biggest surprise that you learned about recruiting in Mexico that may have, assumptions that turned wrong?
Well, I absolutely love all the tips and tricks that, and the nuggets that we've been sharing. And thank you, Tracy, because she's going through her sourcing strategies, and I'm checking the list. Okay, good, we're doing these things. But sometimes it's actually not about technology, and it's not even about strategy. It's about, at the end of the day, recruiting is relationships. So if I could tell a quick funny story.
Absolutely.
Brad Cook was here this morning, loved his speech. And I knew that Brad had recruited globally. So my first thing is, okay, I have my double cappuccino. Who do I know that's grown globally? So I actually called Brad Cook up, and I said, can you help me? We're going into Mexico. And he said, yes, I know a person to call who is Latin and can help you find your first recruiter. I said, great. What can I do for you? And he said, well, I'm going to this party in the desert, and I need a solar panel. I said, seriously? He said, yes. I hope he doesn't mind if I share that. So, then I call our construction team. I work a favor. I get a panel, and I'm driving around in my SUV for about 4 days with this humongous solar panel, before I can hand it over to Brad. So that's literally how we got our first lead. And the first thing I think that's important is how you align. Tracy had a great story about alignment is super important. And we tend to align things by the business unit. But because Mexico is so unique, the employment laws, the language, the culture, my pushback was, let's get a recruiting manager on site who can help lead this. So that was the first point, is hire a local person that really knows the for example, we have a whole array of people to recruit, from senior directors to installers to customer service to salespeople. And so in Mexico City, the local newspaper is still used for installer-type hires, Graphico. It's, LinkedIn is helpful for professionals, but how do we attract customer service people? So that was a very important part one. And the other thing I think is just important as we keep in mind is we do our best to have the strategic plan laid out, but you never know exactly what to expect, so expect the unexpected.
Like having to drive a solar panel to Burning Man as an example.
Right? Exactly.
I was thinking Burning Man.
That's great.
Our company was founded in Burning Man, so I think I can share that. But I happen to have, 2 people on my team. One is Brazilian-born. Spanish is his third language. He was rusty in it as well. I hadn't spoken it for 10 years. But I came to him and I said, Tiago, do you know a little Spanish? Sí. I said, have you been to Mexico on vacation? Do you like fish tacos? Yes. I'm like, you're perfect for the job. And so he's our director of corporate recruiting. He's been flying back and forth and has been building this team. But point being, diversity matters. It's so important to have people on our teams that have a wide array of backgrounds and skills, because you never know when that's going to come in handy.
Awesome. I'm sure there'll be some questions about that. Go ahead, Brad.
No, I appreciate what you say about the workforce planning. I was sharing with somebody at lunch that just had a discussion with somebody from the Wharton School of Business. He was a professor, and he said, the day that talent people can predict workforce planning means you've mastered the economy, you've mastered the financial markets,
right.
And you mastered, and there was something to be said about that you had to be ready to just expect the unexpected. So.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing,
That's
Kia.
perfect.
So the next case study we wanted to share is really about ramping IT. So Brandon, why don't you kind of share a little bit around this specific case?
Yeah. So I ask a question is, how many think of Herbalife as a technology company? Right? Not a lot of people. So Herbalife is, we have 4.1 million members, and the IT infrastructure is so complex that we train 5 people each month to know the payment systems of these systems, and just in case anybody leaves, we have 5 new people who will learn the system every month, even though that might be your regular position. Wow. So building the infrastructure to support 4.1 million members, for so long, it was a 35-year-old company, $5 billion in revenue, and what they realized was we've been focusing so much on the members that now we have to build the infrastructure internally to support this member base, right? So we had to put an entire new HR system in place. We became an Oracle shop, and so we had to find, before we can maximize the next level of systems, we had to get that infrastructure in place. So we were ramping up significantly for the IT side, trying to get people to come to California, and the unexpected part was, in August of last year, we said, oh, by the way, we just purchased this whole high-tech Dell building in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We're going to move our entire IT department to North Carolina. Now, if any of you have been to North Carolina, it's not a very, in the Winston-Salem area, is not a high-tech area. And Dell, we had purchased this very high-tech facility from Dell that was a shell that was never used. And so beautiful facility. So we had to culturally start telling our folks about North Carolina, but then at the same time, still ramping up in the IT side in LA here, and then also ramping up in North Carolina. So we had to look at how do we transition everybody that we just said, here's why you should come to Torrance, and here's why you should come to LA. Now we're going to transition you out to North Carolina. We don't know really which positions are going out yet, but we just know our IT department is transitioning out. So one of the toughest part was, we had to hire 100 folks within this time period as well for this significant project. Many projects. We're doing 3 AP systems. We're bringing online a system for our 2 manufacturing facilities. And so all of those integrations couldn't happen until we got our IT folks in place. And so really having to understand the markets, where we were at, and then also understand what it was that we needed to do differently, because one, people just not one hand went up in here that said Herbalife's a tech company. So once we introduced people to saying, hey, this is what we do, here's some of the cool technology that we're working on, we had to really start thinking creative to having, just info sessions, to everything that you think of doing, but even more so that we could capture it and replay it over and over to those people, so we can say, come on board, because here's what you're working on, but not only here's what you're working on now, here's what the next 5 years looks like. So come join a really cool company, but you're one of the top few Oracle people that are on the latest and greatest technology.
So when you go into a new market, like you did in North Carolina, and there's low brand awareness, right? What are some of the strategies that you found were very, very effective at quickly generating that interest? And kind of a second point to that question, did you find that the bulk of the hires came from the local market, or did you find that you really had to work hard to get these people to move across the country?
We had to work hard, and still so. You know, even the market, the local market is not there. So if you think of, there's a lot of tech people in Research Triangle Park, but that's a drive. I mean, that's, you know, a couple hours away from Winston-Salem. So the local market is tough. So we had to act as if we're going to recruit out of the local area, right? So that was a challenge. But then really getting people to the actual IT people to be engaged as part of the recruiting process, having info sessions. We would have info sessions along with somebody from my TA team. So we would record it just to introduce, here's the technology.
Yeah.
You know, it would be live, so there'd be people all across that could join, you know, and find out what we're doing and what we're doing with that technology. But it was a push, you know, and to say, oh, by the way, you should join Herbalife, even though, you know, we're transitioning, we're moving people to North Carolina, we're moving positions to Mexico. Our lease is expiring in LA, so what's that mean? You know, really having to talk and share that story. But really share the story of Herbalife.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And the cool technology,
And
certainly.
did you use your recruiters from California, or did you hire recruiters in North Carolina?
Both. So it was just, we had a small team, so we hire about 700-800 folks a year. We have a very lean team. We have, I had 11 on my team that consisted of contingent workforce and also recruiters and TA coordinators. And really what we had to do was partner with our contingent worker partners and to our suppliers and say, help us strategize what we can do, because these projects cannot come online until we have met these milestones. So help us be a partner. So we just engaged a lot of our contingent workforce suppliers as well to partner with us. So, and working out, trying things that worked. Some things didn't work, but we tried it. We had the support of the leadership on the IT side, and that's, you know, really partnering with them made all the difference.
And as we talked to some things that worked really well, what was something that just did not go well at all in that program?
You know, one of the things that probably didn't go well was we weren't able to plan. You know, and that was the toughest part. We did not see this move to North Carolina, and so our recruitment message was recruiting people to Southern California.
Yeah,
and
that was a big part of your employment brand.
That was our strategy, right?
Yeah.
Is how do we get people to that market? So to get people on board, and you think about it, it was, you know, they started the transition in August, and we made the decision probably May timeframe, and so some of these people were brand new, and to say, all right, this was our strategy, but just to say, you will have a position.
Beautiful Southern California,
Yeah.
come on aboard.
Right.
You've been here for 60 days, now you got to move
60
to
days,
North
and now you're going to
Carolina.
move across country, but we had to really sell, this is what the facility looks like, here's what it looks like, and imagine, so when I started 2 years ago, there were maybe 14, 15 people at that facility. So it was a brand new facility that will house, and so far this year, we've hired close to 300 to 400 people in that facility.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Great.
I'm going to keep things moving here. I'm going to go back to Kia and a little bit around the story around hiring 500 salespeople coast to coast, selling solar energy. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the interesting things from a talent acquisition perspective about SolarCity is we hire every kind of employee, and sales is the engine that runs our company. So we found that if we have a conversation with people, do you want to save money? Okay. Do you want to use clean energy over dirty energy? Yes. They will sign up. So we are looking for an army of salespeople to literally educate people about solar. And as we come into the fourth quarter, the business is very, very focused because it takes a salesperson about 30 to 60 days to ramp. To make sure we meet our business goals of 1 gigawatt this year, we had to make sure we have enough salespeople. So a lot of frothing at the mouth, a bit of panic for our business managers, and the goal was having a big push as we come into Q4. So 500 salespeople to hire. And this is field salespeople calling on homeowners, like many of us. So this is a big challenge because as this goal ramped, we normally hire about 400 a month. Mysteriously, our applicant flow dropped off. So we had this kind of perfect storm where need increased, flow decreased. Wasn't exactly sure why, had to dig into that. And at SolarCity, many of you are probably aware that solar industry is still very tied in at this point to subsidies. So we're in this rush to become cash flow positive before the subsidies end. So I'm in a position where I can't just throw money at it. I would love to have a crack cocaine habit. That's exactly the same analogy I use, is that yes, we can spend money on Indeed and Career Builder and LinkedIn, but we have a very lean cost per hire, which is $1,000.
Yep.
So that's really lean. That's everything from a cup of coffee that we would buy to a recruiter's salary. So, demand is up, supply is down, still have to manage our costs, and we only have 1 month to do this. And I'm constantly getting calls from the VPs of sales, the SVP of sales. Where are we? What status? So what we did basically is get guerrilla. I think sometimes we forget that recruiting is a contact sport, and you have to be in the arena. You have to be pressing the flesh and meeting people. I love that stat, I think that Tracy just shared, that candidates are 65% more likely to accept an offer if they have a positive relationship before they even interview. And even though we know that our baby is beautiful, we know that SolarCity is this dream place, a lot of candidates still haven't heard of us. So what we did is come up with a contest, basically. You might have seen it on the news, but SolarCity has one-day hiring spree. So that got us some PR, which is on one Monday in every single office from New York to California, we had targeted interviews. That, of course, like everything, it was a last-minute rush, and so the press release was supposed to go out 2 weeks ago. It ended up going out that Friday before the Monday. So it didn't really give us that much of a boost, but what it did do was give us ammunition to keep this fresh with the recruiters and really turn it into an internal competition. So the New York got really competitive with the Mid-Atlantic, who got competitive with California to see how many candidates can we get on the board by this Monday. And that one-day hiring spree pushed us over our goal. We got 100 hires in that as a result of that one day.
Wow.
So that was not my idea. It was a recruiting manager in New York. And I would just say, keep it creative. We tend to do these things the same old things. Okay, sponsor jobs on Indeed, go to Career Builder. But sometimes it's just kind of these grassroots efforts that really make a difference, and keep it fun for the recruiting team that give you that extra incentive to make that one last phone call, at 10 p.m.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think you bring up a great point, right? There's been a lot of discussion today around tech and systems and platform, but the types of scenarios you guys are talking about, you don't have time to go assess a technology vendor to help go support you on this. So you mentioned it's a contact sport. It's just, there's a phone, it's a new piece of technology, let me introduce it to you, and get on that and make 100 phone calls. I think this is a big part of this.
Right, when you need ready now talent.
Yeah.
And then at the same time looking at the data and seeing, okay, applicant flow has dropped off just in the last month, so we do have a little bit of seasonality, I think, after the summer, spike. But the things that were driving candidate flow, the recruiter sourcing got a little blip, Indeed sponsorship, a little blip, some other things. But the second thing we did that was really helpful was pull in our Delta sourcing team. So I have centralized sourcing and just have this elite, what I call rapid response team, that we can pull in an emergency like this. And I highly recommend it for anybody that has these unplanned surges, to have a SWAT team or a Delta force that could come in. And they, by far, they increased our candidate flow 500-fold in 1 month. So it was, again, working the phones as well as us doing this event that really got us through that hurdle.
Awesome. I'm sure there'll be some questions. We'll get to those here shortly. Brandon, last case study, then we'll kind of move into some more discussion and some questions from the audience. A little bit around process and data. You mentioned to me before we get started, you came in and you got hired in as the idea guy and the innovation guy, and you came into kind of a blank slate. A big part of your job was to go and push the envelope and do some creative things. Can you talk a little bit around the process and data pieces that you've been focused on?
Yeah, it was fun. So Herbalife, I always said, is like a $5 billion startup organization. It's been around, since 1980, and for some of the processes, it feels like it's 1989. But the good part is the openness to change and to look at different things. So when I came in, triplicate forms, You know, it was the first 2 weeks I was there, I was like, this is so cool. I remember back when I started in the personnel days, you know, the triplicate forms. And I
use
literally.
the P word.
Yeah. And so they're like, Brandon, seriously. And I said, no, like, where's the microfiche? And they said, not funny, we just got rid of it last year. You know, so I was taking pictures literally and sending it to colleagues of mine. I'm like, this is cool. Like, you know, it was cool for 2 weeks, right? And really what I looked at was we used Taleo, and that system was put in pretty much, it felt like off the shelf. So we needed to update and enhance that. We were looking at, if I looked at the time to fill, it was near 100 days. And I said, what do we got to do this? So one of the first tools that I brought on was our reference checks. As I'm hearing, you know, our recruiters time and time again get on the call, and we use check, and
We do too.
drop down significantly, you know, right away. So it was an easy tool to implement, something that I did right away. Started to look at just other systems, so we brought in assessments. So we were hiring significant amount of leadership. So in 1 year, we had over 200 people that were promoted into a supervisor, or not promoted, but actually hired or promoted into a supervisor above position. And so what we needed to do was we needed to assess those, because some of those leaders were working out, some of them weren't. So brought in an assessment tool and started at the director and above positions. And it was, again, very easy to implement. It was easy to integrate with the hiring teams, because as we were doing the intake meetings, we would explain what the assessment was about. They were interested. They wanted to get their whole team on assessments. And so we started to do that. And then another piece on the contingent workforce side was huge. So as we had a significant spend in our contingent side, so I had to look at, how do we do this better? I have one person managing this spend. We have an IMP, which was an internal managed program, doing it in-house. And I remember that was one of the first things that I had looked at as well. And I said, we can do this better. Our spend is outrageous. We had, you know, contracts anywhere from 50% to 70 some odd percent, no joke, you know, just really kind of no systematic. So really we took a deep dive into that, brought in a VMS tool, which again, not easy, you know, but it took about a year to implement. But out of that, we were able to save $5 million just in going through that piece. And you think about that, it's 1% of the bottom line, right? And then we're actually now creating TA as a revenue center for that. You know, so that was just, those are big projects, right? But it really kind of took a deep dive. And really I said, the two things to my team, I said, the philosophy is great candidate experience and service excellence. Everything that we do, if we try it and it doesn't work, that's okay. As long as we hold those two things as our umbrella, then it's okay to fail. Awesome. You know, and giving them that permission to say, it's okay to fail, we'll try it. As long as you're striving for great candidate experience and service excellence, we will change the perception. We'll change the perception, and we did. We just, year over year, we had a 20% on our Glassdoor interview rating. So we actually increased 20% on a positive interview rating, and we dropped our time to fill down to 54 days over just in a year and a half time period.
So that's massive, by the way. They must have thought you kind of floated around the office with 6 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
They're like, no, not another project.
Yeah, that's right. So you talked a little bit about data, and you talked a little about process. You talked about candidate experience and service excellence. What are some data points that you used with your team to kind of better extract how you guys were doing on those levels?
Yeah. So one was measuring just hiring manager surveys. Nothing big about that, but they hadn't been done. So when I first came in, literally the first week I was there, I sent out a manager survey, just something I created on SurveyMonkey because I wanted to get a benchmark and a baseline. Yeah. So we didn't have anything. So then we started to measure what is our experience quarter over quarter with the hiring managers. If we're rated below average, how do we at least get to average? How do we then get to above average? And really just going around to our stakeholders. What do we need to do different? And what they saw is, and I believe Nick was talking about it today, if not it was Brad, about just kind of the turn and burn. They said, you guys you're just recruiting. You know, I need a partner, you know, and I said, okay, so you need that talent advisor, you know. How are you if we're going to push back, you know, and say, let's think about this. You're going into Mexico. Let's do something. What about their talent resources? Where does it look? Where's the building located at? You know, how are you going to get people to go that 60-mile stretch from, you know, the road?
Did you mentioned that you had to get really clear on the hiring profile, and that you used checked. Did
Yes.
you have any resistance from your hiring managers in introducing that?
No, they actually loved it, and so. Because they were just used to, okay, it's going to take 3 or 4 days, right, for a reference check. And we didn't really share. We just only said if it's thumbs up, thumbs down on the reference check. So hiring managers saying, what are you guys doing? You know, they had no clue. So we started to introduce checked for one of our groups, one of our call centers, and they wanted to measure. They loved the report. They said, how do we measure? We want to start measuring, this person's rated a 3, this person's a 4. Are they really performing better? And if we start looking at them, you know, over time, is their performance going up? Is that make a difference, or should we get someone with, you know, 4+? And so they really started to look. They loved the tool. They loved the questions because it provided some questions that the interview team could probe on, you know, based on those references. So we really tried it in a couple of ways. One, you know, with that group, we started looking at it as part of the interview process, and then we implemented it as far as, you know, once we extended the offer, we did it. So we kind of tried it in both areas, no resistance at all, you know, because they were eager for the change.
That's one of the key things, going back to the sales surge, that was a challenge for us, too, is how do you find a really good entry-level salesperson? And if you ask a salesperson, are you really good? I'm amazing. And then we promote.
And then they talk for 10 minutes
straight,
straight,
and then they talk for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
exactly. And we've promoted managers so quickly, we haven't quite caught up to training them on what to look for. So some tend to fall back into hiring people in their likeness, or what they think a good salesperson should look and feel and talk like. So we just implemented checked as well, starting with our sales team. Now we're in process of implementing it for customer service, and then operations will go live January 1st. And that's been, so far, extremely helpful, because now we have actual data-driven insights based on profiling top performers to know what are the core competencies and culture fit that form a good salesperson within SolarCity. And then that is just a pre-hire baseline, and then the interview with the hiring manager and the recruiter can be more around values, fire in the belly, career goals, and things like that. And we hope that actually that will help lower our costs as well, because of lowering costs of turnover.
Well, that's another point that we did just probably in the last 2 or 3 months. We also implemented where the tool actually will go out and send automatic surveys to the hiring managers and the new hire, and it'll send it over a couple times. So we'll be able to get data, and it's questions of, is a job what you thought it would be? Is it, you know, would you come back now? You know, based on what you know about Herbalife. So it's really it will give some really key insights of our hiring process, what we can do better, and to tweak it, and what our hiring managers need to do better with.
Awesome. Kia, what's this all about? Taking on prisoners in the war for talent.
So first of all, at SolarCity, we do Halloween really big. We compete within different departments. So this is our Sacramento sales office that dressed as the little green army men. But isn't that great, the little platform? I love it. But what this is meaningful to me, too, because our message is that, look, it's not easy changing the world and making the world a better place and disrupting one of the oldest industries out there, which is clean energy. You know, we have policy fights on a regular basis. It's hard. We move fast. If you look at our Glassdoor site, a lot of the feedback is, wow, intense, fast-paced, rapid change. But we use this as part of our recruiting message, because it's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you're somebody that wants to be on the elite team, you know, you want to do something that's really hard but meaningful, then this is a place for you. So kind of going back to our employer branding, I've used this picture now on our Glassdoor site. We tweet it out, and this is the core messaging. It's also just a reminder that, you know, we have to work hard. There's no secret sauce, unfortunately. So we have to wear our little green army outfits and go out there and be smart every day and just be creative and mix it up. And at the end of the day, most importantly, have fun. Yeah. This is why I went into recruiting and not the HR side, because it's fun to give people a career opportunity. And that's just something never to lose sight of.
Great. We're going to open it up to questions. We've got about 10 minutes left here. You know, some key takeaways. What I'd love to, you know, I guess one of the key takeaways, and something was interesting here, and I'd love for you to share a few of your guys' thoughts, was this idea of, you know, with how fast SolarCity's moving, to have a team that is strictly built to deal with the unknown is actually kind of a very smart strategy to deal with these scenarios. Under a really rigid structure, you probably, you know, people just freaking out.
Yeah.
So maybe my first question for you on this is, how is that team resourced, and what do the people look like on that team, like as far as capability and behaviors?
So the first thing, the topic of our panel is agility, and using agility to fill hard positions. So when I hire people to the recruiting team, or one of the team leads hires somebody, we begin with the end in mind. And so we start off saying, how do you deal with change? How do you deal with ambiguity? You know, expect the unexpected. And if people get bright-eyed and excited about that, then we know that that's probably a good fit. And then I remind them again on the first day, remember when I hired you to be a sales recruiter? Well, guess what? That's changed, and now you're an operations recruiter. I've done that many, many times. It's the Sunday memo, if you get it. And so if people look forward to that and embrace it, then you know you're going to have a blast. But we have a lot of people self-select out because it's not the right environment. How's the team aligned? So I do believe that the more you do something, the better you get at it. So we have recruiters, we have coordinators. That team is decentralized. We have just a centralized sourcing team. We have a leadership recruiting team, and then we align by business unit. There are other things that I think are important just to keep the team going. You know, one is we have contests. We have a lot of fun. Just last quarter, we had a contest kind of playing off the TV show, So You Think You Can Recruit. And we did a pitch contest. And then the best videos, we actually recorded people on our TV channel, and our CEO and head of sales, or CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, watched those top videos. Mm-hmm. So recruiting is just central to our whole strategy. The other thing is I do think metrics are important. So in the process, I just launched 2 months ago a recruiter scorecard. So this is for sales recruiters because it's high volume, and frankly, it's kind of scary for some recruiters to have this kind of measure of transparency. But the first measure is quantity of hire, the second is new hire retention, and the third is quality. So how quickly did that person ramp, and what's their production? So it provides a more holistic view of those top 10 recruiters so we can recognize them or use it as a performance management tool.
Sure, that's good.
And then we actually reward our high performance recruiters based on per hire. So you make a minimum of your base or production bonus, whichever's higher. So you know you're going to make a minimum, you're fixed. But if you really kill it and you are making those calls on 10 p.m. and you're going to those job fairs on Saturday and Sunday, there's no cap to what you can earn. So I think that's really important too, is the rewards and mechanisms. It's just commonplace to sales, but sometimes we forget about it in the human capital industry.
Your team's incentivized to go find these really tough to fill roles. Right?
Exactly, and it works.
Well, and having fun though too. It sounds like you just ingrain that as part of the culture.
Exactly.
That's good.
Why don't we open it up for some questions here, and if we get some, great. If not, I've got a few more for the group. Any questions?
They're ready for happy hour.
Yeah. Not doing karaoke.
We're already on the stage.
Yeah.
Question for Kia. I was very interested in when you mentioned you went into Mexico. I was just wondering whether there were any wider business considerations that you had to take into account in terms of, you went in rapidly, and I think you said you had 60 days. How about having an entity set up, or how did you payroll those employees quickly?
Right. So initially, we are using an outside agency to payroll people and to have a work around our systems. So it's a third-party vendor. It's called Fontes. As probably most of us has had experience, we do things better internally, and so by December 1st, we will incorporate that into Workday. We're also having a major ATS integration. We're going live with Workday Recruiting on December 10th. So we initially started to move that quickly by using a local outsource agency for payrolling and tracking and reporting. And then engaging an outside legal firm to be aware of the compliance issues and legal requirements. It's kind of interesting and amusing and somewhat shocking to see an employment application in Mexico, because it starts off with, what is your weight? What is your health? Who do you live with? Do you have children? I mean, whoa. So we philosophically made a decision, too, to maintain our hiring standards and US processes and just bring that to Mexico. Does that answer your question?
Got a question up front here?
Great session, by the way. But Brandon, I was hoping you might be able to elaborate a little bit more on the IMP program that you instituted.
Yeah, so we had a program in the IMPs, the contingent workforce. I really look at, there's 3 areas. There's the RPO, MSP, and then your IMP, and each one has a specific purpose, in my opinion. And so we had one person managing that, and I saw that our spend just on that side was about $30 million. And so I knew that if we didn't get a process around that we needed to, we were letting go of a lot of cost savings from that perspective. And so those were numbers that I was really armed with right from the beginning. And the interesting part is nobody really had the real numbers. So I had my numbers, procurement had their numbers, finance had their numbers, and they were all different. So I said, so if this is just the contingent workforce, excluding independent consultants, SOW employees, our true spend is closer to $100 million. And so from that was a really big selling point to say, we got to build out this program, really get our arms around it, and start looking at that, because that's a true value add to the business. It's a bottom line business function. And so we needed to take a deep dive into that. Answer your question?
Oh, yeah. Please ask me a question.
This question's for Kia.
I know it.
Kia, you'd spoken a little bit about the centralized SWAT sourcing team for your unexpected hiring needs. How do you organize that team? What do they work on when they're not working on that? What's the ideal profile of this team? How large is this team?
So it started because we didn't have this need, and then we started opening up new locations like you did, Brandon, in North Carolina. We didn't have enough resources, so we started RPO. And then we realized, holy cow, we are spending tens of thousands of dollars to get the same hire. And these sudden, unplanned needs with our growth are not going away. So we decided, let's build this in-house. And so like everything, one of the key takeaways, too, is pilot, test, rinse, repeat. So we started off with 2 people, and actually we're very fortunate to convert one of the business owners for the external RPO to join us. And because he's very excited about our mission, about solar. And so his name is Vince Jones. You cannot steal him. But he had run sourcing teams before. And so he started. And just like the rest of our clients, we actually have a 60% referral rate. And so we started off with, who do you know who's really, really good? I do believe that sourcers can have a different mindset where they really want to geek out and they like doing the research and they don't mind working the phones. And so we started with 2 people and built that gradually. And now on the sourcing team, we have 15 people. And it's comprised of probably a handful of people that are pretty junior that do a lot of the initial research. Mm-hmm. And then a handful of people who love working the phones and aren't afraid of using the phones. One's a former stockbroker. And and then a couple others that are just kind of utility players that we can mix as we need it. It really, really works well if you do have those unexpected needs and you are budget constrained, and just starting off small can help. They're also building out the competitor maps and some of these, strategic projects, the talent communities and things like that. So if there ever is a downslope, you can put them on a diversity task force or mining the silver medalists in the ATM or CRM.
And we are out of time. I'd like to thank both Brandon and Kia for being as transparent, and that was some great takeaways, and thank you very much. Thank you all for your
Cam.
questions.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it was fun.
guys. Have a great
You guys
afternoon.
were not too tough on us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.